My champagne glass trembled slightly as I set it down on the marble countertop, the golden liquid catching the light from Boston's skyline through our penthouse windows. Nathan's voice carried from our living room, where he was hosting his executive team for our annual holiday gathering. I smoothed my black cocktail dress, took a deep breath, and prepared to step back into the role I'd played perfectly for 3 years of marriage, the supportive wife with the cute little hobby. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Let me tell you about my wife's investment club, Nathan announced to his colleagues, his voice carrying that familiar note of affectionate condescension. Becca thinks her uncle's old-fashioned approach to value investing is still relevant in the age of algorithmic trading. I maintained my practiced smile as I returned to the group, the one I'd perfected during countless dinner parties where my financial insights were dismissed as quaint and outdated. Around us, Boston's financial elite exchanged uncomfortable glances. If Nathan had been more observant, he might have noticed Olivia Chen, managing director at Summit Partners, subtly raising an eyebrow in my direction. If he'd been less focused on himself, he might have caught the knowing look exchanged between Marcus Johnson and Derek Phillips across our designer coffee table. But Nathan saw only what he expected to see: a wife with a charming little investment club, not the architect of the fund that was quietly becoming his industry's most significant player. The story of how I became the shadow power behind Boston's most influential investment fund began 3 years ago, when I inherited my uncle William's modest portfolio and his decades of handwritten market analyses. To most people, including my husband, they were just old notebooks filled with outdated strategies. To me, they were a roadmap to financial wisdom that transcended trendy investment algorithms and flashy financial technology. Value investing is dead, Nathan would declare at industry conferences, where he was celebrated as a fintech visionary. As the founder and CEO of Quantum Capital, he'd built his reputation on high-frequency trading algorithms and predictive market software. The future belongs to those who understand that markets aren't about patience, they're about speed and disruption. What Nathan didn't know, what I carefully kept from him, was that those outdated notebooks had become the foundation of Davis Strategic Partners, a fund I'd built in the shadows while he assumed I was simply managing family money as a hobby. The same financial institutions that publicly praised Nathan's innovative approaches were privately moving significant capital into my steadily outperforming fund. Uncle William's approach had been simple but profound. Look for undervalued companies with strong fundamentals, invest for the long term, and ignore market noise. While Nathan chased millisecond advantages in trading speed, I was building positions in overlooked companies with sustainable competitive advantages. Tell them about the time you tried to explain value investing to my partners, Nathan urged during the holiday party, his hand heavy on my shoulder. I caught Olivia checking her watch the third time in 15 minutes. Several key players from Boston's financial community were exchanging meaningful glances, and Marcus was typing something on his phone beneath the table. Becca actually suggested I diversify our company's treasury holdings based on her uncle's old notebooks, Nathan continued, encouraging laughter from his inner circle. Can you imagine running a cutting-edge fintech firm on investment strategies from the 1980s? The laughter that followed was strained, forced. If Nathan hadn't been so focused on his own perceived brilliance, he might have noticed that his audience seemed uncomfortable with his dismissal of traditional investment wisdom. My phone buzzed discreetly in my hand. A message from Olivia. Everything's ready for tomorrow's announcement. Board approvals confirmed. I studied the screen briefly before returning the phone to my clutch, remembering the moment 3 years ago when I decided to keep Uncle William's legacy separate from my marriage. But tonight was different. Tonight, the carefully constructed wall between Rebecca Turner, supportive wife, and Rebecca Davis, managing partner of Davis Strategic Partners, was about to crumble. Your investment club must be getting awfully crowded with all those outdated ideas, Nathan announced as dessert, arrived, his voice carrying across our open-concept living room. "Maybe we should create an app for you. Save you all that paperwork." I watched as our housekeeper served chocolate soufflés, noting how Derek's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his dessert spoon. After 3 years of marriage, I'd learned to read the signs of Nathan's impending social spiral. The combination of whiskey and an audience always made him particularly careless with his words. "You know what she still uses?" Nathan turned to Samantha Green, his newly appointed CFO. "Physical file folders and paper statements. She visits her uncle's old office in Providence once a month, probably dusting off all those binders and spreadsheets." What Nathan didn't know was that those monthly visits weren't about nostalgia. They were board meetings with some of the region's most prominent investors. Davis Strategic Partners might prefer traditional analysis methods, but our reach in the modern financial world ran deeper than anyone suspected, especially my husband. "Actually," Marcus cleared his throat, "I'd be very interested in hearing more about traditional value investment approaches. Sometimes the old ways—" "Old ways?" Nathan barked a laugh. "Marcus, my friend, that's why you're just a venture capitalist and I'm a fintech pioneer." He patted my hand condescendingly. "No offense, honey, but your uncle's approach to investing died with the dial-up modem." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on anyone at the gathering who knew the truth. Quantum Capital's remarkable liquidity had a lot to do with a mysterious institutional investor who'd provided crucial backing during their last funding round. An investor who insisted on remaining anonymous and communicating only through layers of legal representatives. "Speaking of Quantum's future," Olivia interjected, "I believe there's an investor meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Investors," Nathan waved dismissively. "That's another thing these old-school financiers never understood. In fintech, it's about vision, not voting rights. Right, Samantha?" Samantha, as the newest member of the executive team, shifted uncomfortably. "Well, actually, shareholder rights do remain quite important in—" "Samantha," Nathan shook his head, "you're thinking too traditionally. That's probably why you were surprised by our capital structure." He turned to the group conspiratorially. "Would you believe she wanted to do a detailed ownership audit in a tech company?" I took a slow sip of water, remembering the ownership audit that Samantha had attempted last month. She'd been quietly blocked by the complex web of holding companies and legal entities I'd established, all leading back to a modest office building in Providence that Nathan had visited exactly once, dismissing it as a quaint little investment. Club headquarters. "You know what Uncle William would have done with Quantum?" Nathan continued, warming to his favorite topic. "He would have demanded dividend payments, traditional board oversight, voting rights." He sneered at the words. He never would have understood our vision for predictive algorithms and market disruption. Marcus checked his phone again, then gave me an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place for tomorrow. I felt a familiar calm settle over me, the same feeling I had during major investment decisions. Patience had always been my greatest asset. "Nathan," I spoke softly, knowing it would make him lean in to hear me. "Perhaps we should discuss something else. The guests might not find company. Structure as fascinating as you do." His condescending smile was immediate and predictable. "See what I mean?" He gestured to the room, always trying to protect me from myself, just like her uncle, always worried about propriety and traditional business etiquette. The mention of propriety coming from a man on his fourth scotch of the evening might have been amusing if it weren't so tragic. Around the room, I could see the growing discomfort among Boston's financial elite. These were people who respected traditional investment wisdom, even if they didn't advertise it publicly. "The best decision I ever made," Nathan announced, his voice carrying through the penthouse, "was keeping my company's cap table tight. No traditional shareholders telling me what to do, no quarterly earnings pressure, no answering to anyone, but my own vision." I caught Marcus attempting to suppress a smile. As a senior partner at Boston's most established venture capital firm, he knew exactly how tight Quantum's cap table really was. After all, he'd helped structure the holding. Companies that obscured Davis Strategic Partners' controlling interest. Traditional investors, Nathan continued, his voice dripping with disdain. They think ownership is about percentages and voting rights. But in fintech, it's about disruption, about moving fast and breaking things. He turned to me with that familiar, patronizing smile. Right, honey. I think understanding who really controls your company matters in any industry, I suggested quietly. The table fell silent for a moment. I thought I might have tipped my hand too early. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But Nathan just laughed again, patting my shoulder. See what I mean? He gestured to the group. She thinks because her uncle left her some dusty old notebooks, she understands corporate control. Tell them, Becca, about how you tried to explain voting rights to me last month. I maintained my practiced smile, thinking about the voting rights he dismissed so casually. The same rights that would be exercised tomorrow morning at 8:30 sharp. Becca, Olivia spoke up, her voice carrying a warning note that my husband was too oblivious to recognize. Perhaps we should change the subject. No, this is important, Nathan insisted. Everyone needs to understand why traditional investment thinking is dead. My wife here. He squeezed my shoulder again. She represents the old way. File folders full of paper, obsessing over shareholder rights and corporate governance. But I represent the future. My phone buzzed one final time. All board members confirmed for tomorrow. Legal team standing by. I slipped it back into my clutch, feeling a calm settle over me. The same calm Uncle William had taught me to maintain during volatile market conditions. To the future, Nathan raised his glass unsteadily, and to leaving the past where it belongs, in stuffy Providence offices with worthless paper files. The toast was met with uncomfortable murmurs and half-raised glasses. In the awkward silence that followed, I could almost hear the clock ticking down to tomorrow morning's revelation. Control in modern finance isn't about paper statements and voting rights, Nathan continued, oblivious to the tension around him. It's about vision, about technology, about knowing what you actually own, I suggested quietly. Nathan laughed again, but this time I noticed a few knowing smiles around the room. Tomorrow, everyone would understand exactly what those worthless notebooks in Uncle William's office really represented. But for now, I was content to play my part for one last evening. After all, my uncle had taught me that the best investors know when to stay quiet and when to show their hand. Tomorrow morning, I would finally show mine. As the holiday party wound down, most guests made gracious but hasty exits. Nathan had moved from scotch to bourbon, his proclamations about the death of traditional finance growing increasingly unsteady. I excused myself to see our guests out, catching a brief moment alone with Olivia near the door. "Are you sure you want to go through with this tomorrow?" she asked quietly. "Once we start, there's no going back." I adjusted the delicate gold bracelet Uncle William had given me when I graduated from Wharton, long before I met Nathan. Do you know what my uncle told me before he died? He said, "Becca, in finance, timing isn't just about when you make your move. It's about waiting until your opponent has positioned themselves perfectly for their own defeat." Olivia smiled slightly, shaking her head. Nathan has certainly positioned himself. I've never seen someone so dismissive of shareholder rights. Because he truly believes he's untouchable, I replied. Quantum capital is his proof that the old rules don't apply anymore, that corporate control is about vision, not voting rights. My phone buzzed again, a message from Marcus. Press release approved. Financial media alerted for tomorrow's announcement. Trading desk ready for market reaction. Samantha tried to warn him, Olivia mused. The ownership audit she attempted last month. If Nathan had paid attention... Nathan sees what he expects to see, I interrupted softly. And he expects to see his wife dutifully visiting her uncle's outdated investment office every month, clinging to old-fashioned notions of financial analysis. The door opened as Derek stepped out, eyeing us cautiously before speaking. The natives are getting restless in there. Nathan is now explaining how shareholder voting rights are relics of the industrial age. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Those relics are about to remind him that some financial principles are timeless. The timing is perfect, Olivia added, scrolling through her phone. The financial press has been speculating about Quantum's mysterious ownership structure ever since that failed acquisition attempt last quarter. The attempted acquisition had been orchestrated by a rival fintech firm convinced that Quantum's unclear ownership structure made it vulnerable. They discovered too late that the company's visionary CEO actually answered to a board controlled by hidden interests, my interests. "Everything's prepared for tomorrow?" Derek asked, though he already knew the answer. As Quantum's business development lead, he'd grown increasingly uncomfortable with Nathan's dismissal of traditional financial oversight. I nodded, thinking of the documents waiting in my office at Davis Strategic Partners. The same office Nathan thought was just a sentimental shrine to my uncle's outdated investment philosophies. The revelation of Davis Strategic Partners' controlling interest will happen in 3 stages. Board meeting at 8:30, press release at 9:00, and my public statement at 10:00. Nathan won't know what hit him. All those months of mocking traditional financial analysis and dismissing shareholder rights, Derek shook his head, while his largest shareholder sat across the breakfast table. The irony, Olivia mused, is that if Nathan had ever bothered to attend one of your investment club meetings, he might have noticed they were actually Davis Strategic Partners board meetings. If he'd ever asked about your monthly visits to Providence. But he didn't, I finished, because in his mind, I was just a wife maintaining her uncle's outdated legacy. Tomorrow, he'll learn exactly what that legacy is worth. I returned to the penthouse to find Nathan still holding court with the few remaining guests, explaining how blockchain would make traditional share certificates obsolete. In the future, he gestured with his bourbon glass, all this paper pushing, all these voting rights my wife's uncle was so obsessed with, they'll be meaningless. Digital transformation is... Nathan, I interrupted softly, retaking my seat. Perhaps we should let our few remaining guests enjoy their drinks without another lecture on corporate governance. He laughed, patting my hand with that familiar condescension. See what I mean? Always trying to protect me from myself, just like her uncle, always worried about propriety and proper corporate procedures. If he hadn't been so focused on his own voice, he might have noticed the knowing looks exchanged between the remaining guests. If he hadn't been 3 bourbons past professional, he might have caught the subtle nods and glances that spoke of tomorrow's carefully orchestrated revelations. But Nathan saw what he expected to see: a wife clinging to her uncle's outdated investment principles, unable to comprehend his grand vision of financial disruption. "Tell them about the voting rights documents you tried to show me last week," he urged, encouraging the table to share his amusement. Pages and pages of legal language about shareholder control and board representation, as if any of that matters in the age of digital transformation. Those same documents would be presented to the board tomorrow morning, revealing that Davis Strategic Partners, through a complex web of holding companies, controlled 51% of Quantum Capital's voting shares. Nathan's grand vision had been funded and controlled by the very traditional investment structures he mockingly dismissed. To the future, Nathan raised his glass again, his words slightly slurred, and to leaving behind all those worthless files in stuffy Providence offices. I joined the toast, my smile never wavering. In less than 12 hours, those worthless files would remind the financial world that some principles of corporate governance never go out of style. The next morning arrived crisp and clear. Boston, harbor sparkling under the winter sun. I had slipped out of bed at 5:30, leaving Nathan still sleeping off his bourbon haze. By 7, I was seated in my corner office at Davis Strategic Partners, the city skyline framed perfectly in the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. The board members are assembled in the main conference room, Zoe, my assistant, announced, tablet in hand. They're ready whenever you are. I checked the time, 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes until the board meeting that would change everything. Has Nathan tried to reach any of our key investors this morning? I asked, reviewing the final presentation one last time. He's left 4 messages for Marcus, Olivia reported, entering with a sleek leather portfolio. Apparently, he wants to schedule a follow-up lunch to capitalize on last night's momentum. If he only knew what kind of momentum he created, Derek added, joining us with the final set of documents. His speech about the worthlessness of shareholder voting rights is already circulating among the board members. The timing couldn't be more perfect. At 8:25, I stood, smoothing my tailored charcoal suit. Is everyone in position? Marcus nodded. Trading desk is ready for the market reaction. PR team is standing by. Legal has triple-checked every document. And Nathan just arrived at Quantum headquarters, Samantha confirmed, checking her phone. Still hasn't read any of his messages. He's telling everyone about how he educated Boston's top investors about the obsolescence of traditional corporate structures. Then it's time, I said quietly, gathering my papers. Shall we go educate him about those structures? The walk to Quantum Capital's offices took exactly 4 minutes. One of the reasons I'd chosen Davis Strategic Partners headquarters in the same building. A fact Nathan had never found significant. As we rode up in the elevator, I thought about all the times he had dismissed my uncle's investment principles, mocked my monthly trips to Providence, laughed at the idea of traditional corporate governance. Ready? Olivia asked as the elevator doors opened on Quantum's executive floor. I checked my watch, 8:29 a.m. Time to show my husband exactly what those worthless files were worth. Nathan's voice carried through the boardroom doors. Once everyone arrives, I want to discuss expanding our algorithmic trading platform. Last night proved that the old guard is finally ready to embrace our vision. I pushed open the doors, followed by Marcus, Olivia, and Derek. The conversation in the room died immediately. Nathan, standing at the head of the table, faltered mid-sentence. Becca, his confusion was evident. What are you doing here? And why are Marcus and Olivia with you? Good morning, Nathan, I said calmly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table. I believe it's time we had a proper discussion about corporate governance. Corporate governance? He laughed, though there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. Honey, this is a board meeting. We're discussing serious business matters, not your uncle's outdated theories. I opened my portfolio, laying out the documents I'd prepared. Actually, Nathan, that's exactly why I'm here. As the controlling shareholder of Quantum Capital through Davis Strategic Partners, I think it's time we reviewed some of those outdated theories. The color drained from his face. Controlling what? What are you talking about? Perhaps, I suggested quietly, you should have paid more attention to those worthless files in Providence. They represent 51% of Quantum's voting shares, held through various investment vehicles controlled by Davis Strategic Partners. Nathan gripped the back of his chair, his knuckles white. This is impossible. I control this company. I'm the majority shareholder. No, Nathan, Marcus spoke up. You're the CEO, appointed by the board, which is controlled by Davis Strategic Partners. Your personal stake is just 17%. All those mysterious institutional investors who funded Quantum's early rounds, Olivia added, the ones who insisted on remaining anonymous, that was Davis Strategic Partners. That was Rebecca. Nathan sank into his chair, his face ashen. The monthly investment club meetings. The Providence visits. Board meetings, I corrected gently. Investment committee reviews. All those times you mocked my uncle's approach to finance, I was actually implementing it right under your nose. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. On the wall-mounted screens, financial news tickers began showing unusual trading activity in quantum stock as the market sensed something was coming. Why? Nathan finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why go through this charade? It wasn't initially planned, I admitted. But when you immediately assumed I was just maintaining some quaint family legacy, when you laughed at the idea of traditional financial analysis and corporate governance. I paused, letting the moment stretch. You showed me exactly who you were, so I showed you exactly what you expected to see. The boardroom doors opened again as the rest of Quantum's directors filed in. Nathan watched helplessly as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. The press release goes out in 15 minutes, I informed him. It will announce Davis Strategic Partners' controlling interest in Quantum Capital, along with new corporate governance measures to ensure proper oversight and accountability. You can't do this, he protested weakly. I'm your husband. And I'm your controlling shareholder, I replied firmly. Something you might have discovered if you'd ever taken those worthless files seriously. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. As the board members took their seats, Nathan remained frozen in his chair, watching his empire slip through his fingers with each passing moment. The wall-mounted screens now displayed Quantum's stock price, which had begun to fluctuate wildly as rumors of a major announcement spread through the market. Before we proceed with the formal meeting, I began, my voice carrying that quiet authority I'd inherited from Uncle William. I believe we should address the elephant in the room. Marcus, would you like to present the ownership analysis? Marcus stood, clicking through a presentation that appeared on the screens. As you can see, Quantum Capital's ownership structure is actually quite traditional, despite public perception. Davis Strategic Partners, through various holding companies, controls 51% of voting shares. Nathan Turner personally holds 17%. The remaining 32% is distributed among other institutional investors, all of whom have been consulted about today's announcement. This is ridiculous. Nathan finally found his voice, though it trembled slightly. I founded this company. I built it from nothing. With funding from Davis Strategic Partners, Olivia corrected, sliding documents across the table. Every major funding round, every significant expansion was financed through investment vehicles, ultimately controlled by your wife's family firm. The color had completely drained from Nathan's face as he stared at the papers in front of him. I could see him processing the dates, the numbers, the carefully constructed web of investments that had given me control while maintaining his illusion of autonomy. All those board meetings you thought were investment club gatherings, Derek added, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. All those times you mocked Rebecca's monthly visits to Providence. You never once questioned why Boston's top financial executives attended her little hobby meetings. Because he couldn't imagine I was capable of anything more significant, I said quietly. Isn't that right, Nathan? He looked up at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in our marriage. The anonymous institutional investor group, the one that saved us during the liquidity crunch last year. Davis Strategic Partners, I confirmed, though you were too busy declaring the death of traditional financial analysis to investigate too deeply. The screen suddenly flickered as CNBC's breaking news banner appeared. Breaking: Quantum Capital CEO faces surprise revelation. Wife's investment firm reveals controlling interest. Nathan watched in horror as the ticker showed our stock price beginning to drop. You've destroyed everything I built. No, Nathan, I corrected firmly. I protected this company while you were busy undermining its foundations. Every time you dismissed proper corporate governance, Every time you mocked traditional investment principles, you were weakening Quantum's future. Mr. Turner, Samantha spoke up, her CFO's precision evident in her tone. As I tried to tell you during the ownership audit last month, our corporate structure has always been traditional. You just refuse to see it. The boardroom doors opened again as our PR team entered, tablets in hand. The full press release has gone live, the communications director announced. CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal are all requesting immediate interviews. Tell them we'll hold a proper press conference at 11 I instructed. For now, let's focus on the board meeting agenda. I turned back to Nathan, who seemed to be aging years with each passing minute. Unless you'd like to resign before we begin the formal proceedings? Resign? He barked out a harsh laugh. From my own company? From the company controlled by Davis Strategic Partners, Marcus corrected. The board will be voting on new governance measures today, including the separation of the CEO and chairman roles. Nathan's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. All this time, every month when you visited that Providence office, I was attending board meetings, reviewing investment strategies, and managing one of Boston's largest investment firms. I finished for him, while you were busy telling everyone that traditional financial analysis was dead. I was using those same principles to build something lasting. The screens now showed all major financial networks covering the story. The ticker beneath displayed our stock price, which had stabilized as the market digested the news that Quantum was actually controlled by a respected investment firm. Your uncle, Nathan said slowly, realization dawning in his eyes. All those stories about his old-fashioned approach to value investing were exactly what you expected to hear. I nodded. You wanted to believe I was clinging to outdated principles, so that's what I showed you. Meanwhile, Davis Strategic Partners was modernizing those same principles for the digital age. The monthly investment club meetings. His voice was barely audible now. Investment committee reviews, Derek supplied, attended by half of Boston's bow financial leaders, the same ones you dismissed as dinosaurs last night. Which brings us to our first order of business, I continued, pulling out another document. The board will be voting on new corporate governance measures, including the appointment of an independent chairman. You can't do this, Nathan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm the controlling shareholder, I reminded him. Something you might have discovered if you'd ever bothered to look beyond your own preconceptions. The morning sunlight streamed through the boardroom windows, illuminating the Boston skyline beyond. The same view I'd looked at countless times from my office at Davis Strategic Partners, waiting and watching for this moment. The vote will proceed as scheduled, I announced to the board. But first, I believe my husband deserves to understand exactly how his outdated wife built this position. I nodded to Marcus, who began displaying another presentation. Over the past 3 years, Davis Strategic Partners has systematically acquired controlling interest in key fintech companies, always through complex holding structures that masked our involvement. Quantum Capital was actually one of our earliest investments. Every time you dismissed traditional financial analysis, Olivia added, you were actually making our job easier. No one looked too closely at the ownership structure because you kept insisting it didn't matter. As the meeting progressed, I watched Nathan, the man who had spent years dismissing my capabilities and mocking my uncle's legacy, come to terms with the new reality. His empire hadn't been built on disruption and vision alone. It had been quietly supported and ultimately controlled by the very traditional investment principles he so frequently ridiculed. The vote is final, Olivia announced, collecting the ballots from board members. The new governance measures have been approved unanimously, including the separation of CEO and chairman roles. I watched as Marcus pulled up the real-time market data on the main screen. Quantum's stock had stabilized after the initial shock, actually trending upward as investors processed the news that the company was controlled by a respected investment firm rather than a self-proclaimed visionary who dismissed traditional governance. "This is insane," Nathan muttered, staring blankly at his phone now flooding with messages he'd ignored all morning. "My own wife. My own company." "Actually," I corrected gently, "it was never your company, Nathan. Quantum has been controlled by Davis Strategic Partners since its Series A funding round. You were just too convinced of your own narrative to notice." The press conference was set for 11:04 a.m. All major networks confirmed they were particularly interested in the monthly investment club meetings that were actually Davis Strategic Partners board reviews. I felt no joy in Nathan's humiliation, only a sense of professional satisfaction that proper governance was finally being established at the company my fund had nurtured from the beginning. As the financial world digested the news that one of Boston's most celebrated fintech disruptors was actually controlled by a traditional value investment firm, I thought about Uncle William's final advice to me. "Remember, Becca, the market rewards patience above all else. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait for others to reveal their true nature." Nathan had certainly revealed his, through every dismissive comment, every mocking reference to traditional finance, every moment he underestimated what his wife was capable of building. Now, as Boston's financial community adjusted to the new reality, one thing was becoming abundantly clear. Some investment principles never go out of style, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. The boardroom fell silent as the implications of my announcement settled over the assembled directors. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston's financial district gleamed in the morning light, unaware that power was shifting within one of its most celebrated companies. Nathan remained frozen in his chair, his typical confidence shattered as he stared at the documents before him, irrefutable evidence that his wife controlled his company. "I'd like to review the quarterly performance numbers," I said calmly, changing the subject with practiced ease. The room seemed to exhale collectively, grateful for the return to business as usual, though nothing would ever be usual again. I nodded to Samantha, who began her CFO presentation with newfound confidence, occasionally glancing at Nathan as though seeing him for the first time. As financial projections and growth metrics flashed across the screens, I watched Nathan from the corner of my eye. He was scrolling through his phone, likely reading the financial news alerts about Quantum Capital's surprise ownership revelation. His face cycled through emotions: disbelief, anger, betrayal, before settling into a mask of cold calculation I recognized all too well. Nathan might be humiliated, but he was already searching for a way to regain control. When the board meeting concluded 90 minutes later, most directors lingered, suddenly eager to establish stronger connections with Davis Strategic Partners leadership. Nathan slipped out without a word, leaving his presentation materials scattered across the table, a small but telling sign of his unraveling composure. "He's headed to Grayson's office," Olivia murmured, checking her phone as we gathered our materials. Harold Grayson was Nathan's personal attorney, a sharp-elbowed litigator known for aggressive tactics. "Looks like he's not going down without a fight." "I'd be disappointed if he did," I replied, organizing my notes with deliberate precision. Nathan never understood that proper corporate governance isn't about control for control's sake. It's about stewardship. I closed my portfolio with a satisfying snap. "And we've planned for every contingency." The press conference was scheduled for the Harrington Hotel's Grand Ballroom, the same venue where, just 6 months earlier, Nathan had delivered a keynote address mocking financial dinosaurs still clinging to outdated investment principles. The irony wasn't lost on Boston's financial press, who had assembled in full force, cameras trained on the podium where I would soon make my first public appearance as the controlling shareholder of Quantum Capital. 2 minutes until we go live," Zoe whispered, adjusting my microphone. "Every major network is carrying this. The story is already trending as the fintech revelation. I caught my reflection in one of the ballroom's ornate mirrors, the same ones that had witnessed Nathan's condescending performance half a year ago. My navy suit projected exactly what I needed: competence, control, and quiet authority. "Nathan's watching from Grayson's office," Marcus reported, checking his tablet. "The market's up 6% since the announcement. Turns out investors prefer traditional governance to visionary disruption." A message appeared on my phone from Warren Kowalski, the legendary value investor who had mentored Uncle William decades ago. "Your uncle would be proud. Sometimes the best returns come from investments others are too arrogant to value properly." The cameras started rolling as I took my place at the podium, facing the world's financial press. The questions came rapid fire. "Ms. Turner, how did you maintain this secret for 3 years?" called out a reporter from Bloomberg. "By letting people see what they expected to see," I responded with a calm smile. "When you're underestimated, it's remarkable what you can build in plain sight." "Was this a planned takeover of your husband's company?" demanded someone from CNBC. "Quantum Capital was never my husband's company," I corrected gently. "Davis Strategic Partners has been the controlling shareholder since the beginning. We simply allowed Nathan to maintain his preferred narrative about independent leadership." "What about the monthly investment club meetings that were actually board sessions?" I couldn't help but smile at that one. Those meetings were attended by Boston's top financial executives, all of whom understood the value of discretion. Sometimes the best way to hide significant influence is to let others dismiss it. "Ms. Turner," a reporter from the Wall Street Journal pushed forward, "your husband repeatedly mocked traditional financial analysis. Was this revelation planned as revenge?" "This isn't about revenge," I stated firmly. "It's about proper corporate governance and responsible business management. Quantum Capital needs structure and accountability to reach its full potential. The company's algorithmic innovations are groundbreaking, but they require sound financial oversight to deliver sustainable shareholder value." The questions continued for over an hour, each one peeling back another layer of the story that was captivating the business world. Finally, my communications director called for a break, and I stepped away from the podium to find Derek awaiting with updates. "The Wall Street Journal is running a special feature," he reported. "The Power of Paper, How Traditional Financial Analysis Outsmarted Silicon Valley. They want an exclusive about your uncle's investment principles." "Nathan's on his way down," Olivia warned, appearing at my side. "He's demanding a private conversation." I nodded, having expected this. "Use the small conference room. Make sure the cameras can't see us." Moments later, Nathan burst into the room, his usually impeccable appearance noticeably disheveled. His custom-tailored shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. The transformation from confident CEO to blindsided husband had happened in mere hours. "Are you happy now?" he demanded, pacing the perimeter of the conference table. "You've humiliated me in front of the entire financial world." "You humiliated yourself, Nathan," I replied quietly. "Every time you mocked traditional investors, every time you dismissed proper corporate governance, you were undermining your own credibility." "This is insane," he continued pacing, hands gesturing wildly. "My own wife secretly controlling my company through some old money investment firm." "Again, it was never your company," I corrected, maintaining my composure. "And Davis Strategic Partners isn't just some old money firm. We manage over $30 billion in assets across multiple sectors, all while you were busy declaring the death of traditional investment principles." "The investment club meetings," he stopped pacing, realization dawning. "All those executives who attended, they were reporting to you, weren't they?" "They recognized the value of proper financial analysis," I explained, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from my sleeve. While you were busy moving fast and breaking things, we were building something sustainable. And our marriage? His voice cracked slightly. Was that just part of your investment strategy too? I felt a moment of genuine sadness. I loved you, Nathan, but you could never see past your own preconceptions. Every time I tried to discuss finance, you dismissed me. Every time I offered insights, you laughed them off. Because I thought you were just... He trailed off, realizing how it would sound. Just a wife, I finished for him. Just someone maintaining her uncle's outdated legacy. That's exactly what you were supposed to think. Your dismissal of traditional financial analysis made it easy to work in the shadows. The door opened as Zoe peeked in. Ms. Turner, Harvard Business School is on line 1. They want you to give a guest lecture on hidden power structures in modern finance. Nathan laughed bitterly. Of course they do. Everyone wants to hear from the wife who outsmarted her fintech visionary husband. No, I corrected. They want to hear from the investor who understood that true influence doesn't need to announce itself. My uncle taught me that lesson, though you were too busy mocking his principles to learn from them. Your uncle, Nathan said slowly. All those stories about his old-fashioned approach to value investing were exactly what you wanted to hear, I nodded. You needed to believe. I was clinging to outdated principles, so that's what I showed you. Meanwhile, Davis Strategic Partners was modernizing those same principles for the digital age. The door opened again, this time revealing Marcus with more market updates. The stock's up 9% now. The market clearly approves of our new governance structure. Governance structure, Nathan repeated mockingly. All those times I declared independence from traditional financial control, you were actually reporting to one of the most traditional firms in Boston. You just couldn't see it, I finished, because you couldn't imagine your wife being anything more than an investment club organizer. Zoe appeared again. The Financial Times wants to know if you'll write a series on female leadership in finance. They're calling it The Power of Being Underestimated. I caught Nathan's eye, seeing the final pieces click into place in his mind. All those dismissed suggestions, ignored insights, and mocked principles had actually been the foundation of something he'd failed to recognize. Real, lasting influence. The Providence office, he said quietly. Those worthless files are worth about $8 billion at current market prices. Closer to $2 billion with today's market reaction, Marcus supplied helpfully. Though that value is likely to increase now that the market knows quantum has proper governance. Nathan sank into a chair, the full weight of the revelation finally hitting him. All this time, while I was declaring the death of traditional investment principles. I was using those same principles to build something lasting, I finished. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. The following week unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of revelations and realignments. From my office at Davis Strategic Partners, I watched as the financial world adjusted to its new reality. The wall of screens displayed various financial networks, all dissecting different aspects of what the media had dubbed the quantum correction. Another interview request, Olivia announced, entering with a fresh stack of papers. Forbes wants you on their cover. The Hidden Hand, How Traditional Financial Analysis Conquered FinTech. I glanced at Quantum's stock ticker, which had stabilized at 22% above its pre-revelation price. The market had spoken clearly. Proper corporate governance was worth more than disruptive vision alone. Nathan signed the separation agreement this morning, Marcus reported, taking his usual seat by the window. He's stepping down as CEO, though he wants to maintain his 17% stake. Let him keep it, I replied, signing another stack of documents. It might teach him the value of being a minority shareholder under proper governance. The Boston skyline stretched out beyond my office windows, looking different somehow. Clearer, perhaps. now that I no longer had to maintain the illusion of being just Nathan's wife with an outdated inheritance. "The Harvard Business Review piece is ready for your approval," Derek added, sliding a tablet across my desk. "The Power of Paper: How Traditional Financial Analysis Silently Shaped the Fintech Revolution. They're particularly interested in your uncle's investment principles." I smiled, thinking of those principles, the same ones Nathan had mocked so consistently. My uncle always said that true financial wisdom doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be patient. Speaking of patience, Samantha entered with the latest financial reports. "Our institutional investors are thrilled with the new governance structure. The uncertainty discount that plagued our stock has completely disappeared." My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Meeting at the apartment tonight? We need to talk about what happens next." Warren Kowalski's office called again, Zoe announced from the doorway. He'd like to have dinner next week to discuss, in his words, how old-school value investing taught fintech a valuable lesson. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan had spent years dismissing investors like Kowalski as dinosaurs unable to comprehend modern finance. Now those same dinosaurs were celebrating Davis Strategic Partners' strategic patience. "The Wall Street Journal is running a special series," my communications director announced, pulling up the preview on my tablet. "The Renaissance of Corporate Governance: How Traditional Financial Principles Quietly Conquered Boston's Fintech Sector." They want to feature Davis Strategic Partners as the centerpiece. I studied the draft article, noting how it emphasized the value of traditional financial analysis in the modern age. "Make sure they understand this isn't about old versus new," I instructed. "It's about combining proven principles with modern opportunities." "Like your uncle always said," Derek smiled. "The best investors know when to stay quiet and when to show their hand." Another text from Nathan appeared. "The apartment feels empty without you. Everything feels empty now." I pushed back from my desk, walking to the window, the same view I'd looked at countless times while building this position, while letting Nathan believe exactly what he wanted to believe about his wife's capabilities. The Financial Times piece is getting significant attention, Olivia reported. "The Power of Being Underestimated: How Gender Bias Helped Hide a Financial Empire." They're calling it a wake-up call for the fintech industry. "It's already required reading at several business schools," Marcus added. "They're using it to teach about hidden power structures and the danger of assumptions in modern finance." My phone buzzed again. This time a message from Uncle William's old friend who'd helped me maintain the Davis legacy. "William would be proud. You didn't just preserve his principles. You proved their timeless value." "The New York Times wants to do a profile," Zoe reappeared. "The wife who wasn't. How traditional financial analysis outmaneuvered fintech." I turned back to my team, these people who'd helped me maintain this delicate balance for 3 years. "Schedule the Times interview," I decided. It's time to show the world that financial analysis isn't about old versus new. It's about building something lasting. "And Nathan?" Olivia asked quietly. "What do you want to do about his request to talk?" I thought about my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, and his journey from mockery to understanding. Tell him I'll meet him at the apartment tonight. Some conversations need to happen in private. "The press will want to know about the personal angle," my communications director warned. "They're already speculating about how this affects your marriage." "Then we'll give them the truth," I replied. "That sometimes the best way to lose power is to dismiss those you think don't have any." My phone lit up with another message, this time from the investment firm in Providence. "Your monthly appointment is tomorrow, Ms. Davis, though I suppose you won't need to maintain the pretense anymore." I smiled, remembering all those visits that Nathan had dismissed as sentimental attachment to worthless papers. "Actually, I think I'll keep the appointment. Some traditions are worth maintaining." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across my office as I prepared for the evening ahead. On the screens, financial analysts continued to dissect the revelation that had shaken the fintech world's foundations. But the real story, I knew, wasn't about hidden power or corporate governance. It was about patience, about letting others see what they expect to see, and about building something lasting while everyone else was busy declaring the death of traditional principles. "Your car is ready whenever you want to head home," Zoe interrupted my thoughts. Home. The word felt different now, like everything else, transformed by the revelation of truth, by the dropping of pretenses. "Tell Nathan I'll be there in an hour," I decided. Some conversations are worth having face to face. The drive to what had once been our shared penthouse felt different now. Boston's evening light sparkled against the rain-slicked streets as my driver navigated through the city I'd helped shape from the shadows. The same route I'd taken countless times, pretending to be just a wife returning from investment club meetings, now felt like a victory lap. Nathan was waiting in the living room when I arrived, the wall of windows behind him offering a view of the harbor lights. The same view he'd once claimed as a symbol of his fintech empire's success, not knowing it was actually built on Davis Strategic Partners' foundation. "You could have told me," he said quietly as I set my purse down on the marble counter. "All those years, all those times I dismissed your uncle's principles." "Would you have listened?" I asked, remembering countless dinners where he'd mocked traditional financial analysis. "Or would you have seen it as proof that women don't understand modern finance?" He flinched at that, perhaps remembering his own words from countless social occasions. The investment club visits, the charity meetings, board meetings, I corrected gently, investment committee reviews, strategy sessions with the same executives you dismissed as financial dinosaurs. The room fell silent, except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. On the coffee table, financial magazines bore headlines about the revelation that had shaken the fintech world, the hidden hand of traditional governance, and how old money quietly controlled fintech's future. "I've been offered a teaching position at MIT Sloan," Nathan said suddenly. "They want me to teach a course on financial governance, specifically on the dangers of dismissing traditional investment principles." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The student becomes the teacher. "More like the fool becomes the cautionary tale," he replied bitterly. The fintech visionary who couldn't see that his own wife controlled his company through old-school value investing. "It wasn't about control, Nathan," I said, moving to the window. "It was about building something lasting, something that would prove my uncle's principles still had value in the modern world." "While I was busy declaring their death," he finished. "God, Becca, do you know how many times I mocked those principles in board meetings? In press interviews?" 17 major interviews, I confirmed, plus 28 conference keynotes, and countless social occasions, including last month's gala, where you called my inheritance dusty old investment papers. He sank into the leather armchair, the same one where he'd often lectured me about the obsolescence of traditional financial models. "How did you maintain the secret for so long?" "By letting you see exactly what you expected to see," I replied. "Every time you dismissed my capabilities, every time you mocked my uncle's legacy, you made it easier to work in the shadows." My phone buzzed. Another message from the Financial Times. "Final draft ready for approval. The power of being underestimated. How gender bias helped hide a financial empire. The press is calling it the greatest financial revelation of the decade," Nathan noted, gesturing to the magazines. "The wife who outmaneuvered fintech while being dismissed as an investment club organizer." "The press loves a good story," I acknowledged. "But the real lesson isn't about deception or control. It's about the danger of assumptions, about the power of patience, about the value of traditional principles in a modern world." "Your uncle," Nathan said slowly. All those stories about his old-fashioned approach to business were exactly what you needed to believe, I finished. You needed to see me as someone clinging to outdated principles, so that's what I showed you. Meanwhile, Davis Strategic Partners was modernizing those same principles for the digital age. Outside, the Boston rain had intensified, drumming against the windows like an accompaniment to our conversation. Each drop seemed to echo the falling pieces of Nathan's carefully constructed worldview. "I've been asked to resign from the Future of Finance initiative," he said, a hint of irony in his voice. Apparently, being outmaneuvered by traditional financial analysis doesn't inspire confidence in one's visionary status. And yet quantum stock is up 22% since the revelation, I pointed out. The market seems to prefer clear governance to disruptive vision alone. My phone buzzed again. Marcus this time. Harvard Business School case study approved. The quantum correction, traditional financial analysis in the digital age, will be required reading next semester. You know what the worst part is? Nathan looked up, his face showing the weight of realization. If I had ever bothered to attend one of your investment club meetings, if I'd ever taken your insights seriously, we could have built something remarkable together, I finished softly. Instead of working in parallel, instead of maintaining this divide. Instead, I became the cautionary tale, he nodded. The fintech visionary who was so busy declaring the death of traditional investment principles that he couldn't see them working right under his nose. I moved to gather my things, our conversation drawing to its natural close. The divorce papers will be ready next week. You can keep your 17% stake in Quantum. Consider it a lesson in being a minority shareholder under proper governance. Becca, he called as I reached the door. Your uncle. What would he say about all this? I paused, thinking of the man who taught me that true financial wisdom doesn't need to announce itself. He would say that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully, and that the best investment strategy is letting others underestimate you. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone lit up with one final message, this time from Warren Kowalski. Your uncle was right. Old money doesn't need to shout to be heard. Looking forward to dinner next week. The rain had stopped by the time I reached my car, leaving Boston's streets glistening under the evening lights. Behind me, the penthouse that had witnessed 3 years of pretense grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Ahead, the Boston skyline beckoned, a testament to the power of patience, the value of traditional principles, and the quiet strength of being underestimated. Where to, Ms. Davis? My driver asked. Davis Strategic Partners, I replied, thinking of the empire I'd built while others weren't watching. It's time to show the world that some principles never go out of style. In the weeks that followed, the financial world continued to digest what had happened at Quantum Capital. The story became a case study in business schools across the country, a cautionary tale about the dangers of dismissing traditional financial wisdom and the power of hidden influence. Nathan adjusted to his new reality with a surprising grace. After the initial shock wore off, he seemed almost relieved to be freed from the constant pressure of maintaining his visionary persona. He took the teaching position at MIT Sloan, where his course on financial governance in the digital age quickly became oversubscribed. Students were eager to learn from the man who'd learned the hard way that disruption without governance leads to vulnerability. For my part, I stepped fully into the role I'd been preparing for since Uncle William's passing. As the public face of Davis Strategic Partners, I no longer needed to hide my financial acumen or downplay my strategic thinking. The Wall Street Journal profile that had once seemed impossible, meet Rebecca Davis, the quiet revolutionary of Boston finance, now hung framed in my office lobby. Our divorce proceeded amicably, with Nathan retaining his minority stake in Quantum as we'd agreed. We occasionally crossed paths at industry events, where he would nod respectfully from across the room. A far cry from the dismissive husband who once patted my hand condescendingly when I offered investment insights. The most significant Change, however, wasn't in Nathan or even in quantum capital. It was in how Boston's financial community treated women with investment clubs and financial hobbies. Almost overnight, male executives became noticeably more attentive when female colleagues spoke about market trends or corporate governance. No one wanted to be the next Nathan Turner, blindsided by underestimating the wrong person. 6 months. After the revelation, I found myself back at the Harrington Hotel's Grand Ballroom, this time to deliver the keynote address at the Northeastern Investment Summit, the same event where Nathan had once dismissed traditional investors as financial fossils. As I took the podium, facing the assembled elite of Boston's financial world, I couldn't help but note the irony. The room that had once echoed with mockery of traditional investment principles now fell silent, to hear those very principles explained by the woman who had proven their enduring value. "The most dangerous phrase in investing," I began, "is this time it's different. Every generation believes they've discovered something that renders fundamental principles obsolete. But as my Uncle William Davis understood, true financial wisdom doesn't reject innovation. It incorporates it while remaining grounded in timeless fundamentals." From my vantage point on stage, I could see faces that had once dismissed me now leaning forward attentively. Executives who had barely acknowledged my presence at Nathan's parties now scrambled for front row seats. The power dynamics had shifted completely. Davis Strategic Partners doesn't succeed despite our respect for traditional financial analysis, I continued. We succeed because of it. In a world obsessed with disruption, sometimes the most revolutionary act is remembering what doesn't need to be disrupted. After the keynote, as I navigated through crowds of people suddenly eager to share their long-held beliefs in traditional investment principles many had dismissed just months earlier, I spotted a familiar face near the exit. Nathan stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met briefly across the room. He gave a small, rueful smile and a slight nod before turning to leave, a wordless acknowledgement of the lesson he'd learned at considerable cost. Sometimes the person you underestimate the most becomes the one who teaches you the most valuable lesson. Later that evening, as I sat in my office overlooking Boston Harbor, I opened Uncle William's favorite book on value investing, the one Nathan had once mockingly called a financial dinosaur's Bible. Inside the cover, Uncle William had written an inscription years ago that now seemed prophetic. "To my niece Rebecca, remember that the market rarely rewards those who shout the loudest, but often rewards those who think the deepest. Your greatest advantage may be that others underestimate you. Use it wisely." I ran my fingers over his handwriting, thinking about how his wisdom had guided me through building Davis Strategic Partners, through my marriage to Nathan, and through the carefully orchestrated revelation that had transformed both our lives. My phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Davis Strategic Partners just named Investment Firm of the Year by Financial Times. They specifically cited our seamless integration of traditional analysis with modern technology. I smiled, thinking of all the times Nathan had insisted these two approaches were incompatible. The market had rendered its verdict, just as it always did, rewarding patience and sound governance over flashy disruption without foundation. On my desk sat a letter that had arrived earlier that day, an invitation to join the board of the Boston Federal Reserve, a position traditionally reserved for the most respected financial minds in the region. Next to it was a handwritten note from Warren Kowalski. "William always said you would surpass him someday. Even he underestimated how right he would be." Outside my window, Boston's financial district glittered in the evening light. A landscape of power and influence I had navigated silently for years before revealing my true position. The journey had required patience, strategy, and the willingness to be underestimated, but the result was worth every moment of pretense. I opened my desk drawer and took out the small brass key that unlocked the Providence office. The space Nathan had dismissed as a shrine to outdated financial wisdom. Though I no longer needed to maintain the pretense of monthly investment club meetings, I still found myself drawn to that quiet space where Uncle William had first taught me that. True financial strength didn't need to announce itself. It simply needed to work, consistently and patiently, until the right moment to be revealed. In the end, that was the lesson Nathan never grasped until it was too late. Sometimes the greatest power comes not from disruption, but from patience. Not from shouting your vision, but from quietly building something of lasting value. And sometimes, the person others dismiss as maintaining outdated traditions is actually the one most capable of shaping the future. The reflection in my office window transformed as daylight faded, revealing more of my own image against the darkening Boston skyline. 6 months had passed since the revelation that stunned the financial world, and though the media frenzy had subsided, the aftershocks continued to reshape the industry landscape. I traced the embossed lettering on the invitation that had arrived that morning, a request to deliver the commencement address at Wharton, my alma mater. The irony wasn't lost on me. 10 years ago, I'd sat among those graduates, listening to Nathan deliver a speech about disrupting traditional finance. Now I would stand at that same podium, living proof that those traditions had enduring value. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Zoe stood in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Your 7 o'clock is here," she said, "and the quarterly reports are ready for review when you finish." I smoothed my skirt as I stood. "Show him in, please." The young man who entered my office clutched a leather portfolio with white-knuckled intensity. Fresh out of business school, eyes bright with ambition, he reminded me of Nathan when we'd first met. Brilliant, driven, and dangerously convinced of his own infallibility. "Ms. Davis," he extended his hand with rehearsed confidence. "Thank you for taking this meeting. I know how valuable your time is." "Time is the one investment we can never recover," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Please, sit." As we settled into our seats, I observed him carefully. Jason Reynolds, 26, graduated top of his class at MIT. His trading algorithm had caught the attention of 3 major investment banks, but he'd requested this meeting with me specifically. Something unthinkable before the quantum revelation. "My algorithm can predict market movements with 88% accuracy," he began without preamble, sliding a tablet across my desk. "It analyzes patterns in high-frequency trading that human analysts simply can't process fast enough to—" I raised my hand slightly and he stopped mid-sentence. The old Rebecca, the one who played the role of Nathan's supportive wife, would have smiled politely and asked simplistic questions. But that woman no longer existed. "Before we discuss your algorithm, Mr. Reynolds, tell me something. What happens to your model during black swan events? How does it respond to geopolitical crises that don't follow historical patterns?" His momentary hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "The system can adapt to new data points as they emerge," he recovered quickly. "Machine learning enables—" "And what underlying economic fundamentals does your model consider? How does it weigh intangible assets against traditional valuation metrics?" The young man shifted in his seat. This wasn't the conversation he had prepared for. Like many brilliant technical minds, he had expected to dazzle me with computational speed and predictive accuracy, not be questioned about fundamental investment principles. "With respect, Ms. Davis, I think you might be approaching this from an outdated—" He stopped abruptly, realizing his blunder. A slight smile curved my lips. "An outdated perspective?" I finished for him. "Be careful, Mr. Reynolds. Those words cost someone a company once." Color flooded his face. "I didn't mean—" "The algorithm looks promising," I said, reviewing the materials he'd provided. "But it's a tool, not a strategy. Davis Strategic Partners would be interested in exploring its application, but only as part of a balanced investment approach that respects fundamental analysis." Relief washed over his features. "Of course. That's exactly what I was hoping for. He hadn't been hoping for that at all, but he was smart enough to adapt. As we discussed potential next steps, I studied this young man who represented the next generation of financial innovators. Would he learn the lesson of balance sooner than Nathan had? Or would he too need to be humbled before understanding that innovation without foundation leads to instability? After he left, I returned to the window, watching lights blink on across the financial district as dusk settled over Boston. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Quantum's new CEO just announced the hybrid strategy we recommended. Stock up 4% in after-hours trading. Another message followed immediately after, this one from Marcus. Nathan's book proposal was accepted. Disruption and Discipline, Finding Balance in Modern Finance. His agent says it's a mea culpa wrapped in a business strategy guide. I set the phone down, thoughtful. Nathan's transformation from dismissive husband to humbled student of traditional finance continued to evolve in unexpected ways. His MIT Sloan lectures had become surprisingly popular, particularly his candid accounts of how his arrogance had blinded him to the vulnerability in his own company's governance structure. We'd developed an unusual post-marriage relationship, not quite friends, but no longer adversaries. Occasionally, we would meet for coffee, discussing financial trends with the professional respect that had been impossible during our marriage. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with a mixture of admiration and regret, clearly wondering about the woman who had been sitting across from him all those years while he failed to truly see her. The quarterly performance reports waited on. My desk, Davis Strategic Partners, had continued its steady growth, with assets under management now exceeding $40 billion. Our hybrid approach, combining traditional fundamental analysis with selective technological innovation, had attracted a flood of institutional investors disillusioned with pure disruption plays that delivered volatility without sustainable returns. As I reviewed the numbers, my attention was drawn to a new holding, Artemis Technologies, a promising blockchain infrastructure company led by a woman who had once been dismissed as too conservative for the cryptocurrency space. Now her methodical approach was paying dividends as more impulsive competitors imploded during the recent market correction. My private line rang, the one reserved for our most significant investors. Rebecca Davis, I answered. Ms. Davis, it's Elizabeth Blackwell. The voice belonged to the managing director of one of Europe's oldest private banks. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all, Ms. Blackwell. What can I do for you? I've been following your work since the quantum revelation with great interest, she said. Our investment committee has authorized me to explore a strategic partnership with Davis Strategic Partners. We're particularly impressed with your governance model. 10 minutes later, after scheduling a formal meeting, I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. Elizabeth Blackwell was notoriously selective about her bank's partnerships. Before the quantum revelation, she wouldn't have given Davis Strategic Partners a second look. Not because our performance didn't warrant attention, but because, like so many others, she would have seen only what she expected to see. A small regional firm maintaining outdated investment traditions. The quantum revelation had changed that forever. Now, Davis Strategic Partners was recognized as a pioneer in what financial media had dubbed neo-traditional investing, a blend of time-tested principles and thoughtful innovation that avoided both stagnation and reckless disruption. As I gathered my things to leave for the evening, my eyes fell on the framed photograph on my desk. Uncle William standing outside the Providence office, his arm around my shoulders on the day he formally made me his successor. Remember, Little Owl, he had said, using the childhood nickname that had stuck through my adult years. In finance, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a competitive advantage. How right he had been. In a financial landscape obsessed with speed and disruption, patience had been my secret weapon, allowing me to build something substantial while others chased quarterly results, allowing me to wait for the perfect moment to reveal my position while Nathan unknowingly undermined his own. The car service was waiting when I reached the lobby. "The Providence office, Ms. Davis?" my driver asked. "Yes, please, Michael." Though my primary operations had moved to Boston, I still maintained the Providence office where Uncle William had built his legacy. It remained my sanctuary, a place to think deeply about investment decisions away from the noise of the financial district. As we crossed the city limits, leaving Boston's gleaming towers behind, I checked my calendar for the next day. The morning would bring a board meeting for Quantum Capital. Though I had relinquished the chairmanship to an independent director, I remained the controlling shareholder and took that responsibility seriously. The afternoon included an interview with the economist for a special feature on governance in financial technology firms. And sandwiched between those appointments was lunch with Senator Marshall, who was crafting legislation on financial technology regulation. My perspective as someone who straddled both traditional investment and technological innovation was apparently valuable to lawmakers struggling to balance innovation with stability in the financial system. It was strange to think how differently my day would have looked 6 months ago. The same meetings might have occurred, but I would have attended them in the shadows, working through proxies while maintaining the fiction of being merely Nathan's wife with a quaint investment hobby. The liberation of stepping fully into my power had been exhilarating, but it came with new challenges. Now that I was visible, I was also a target. Financial media scrutinized every move Davis strategic partners made. Competitors who had once ignored us now analyzed our strategies intensely. Former allies who had kept my secret felt entitled to special access or consideration. The car pulled up to the modest brick building that housed the original Davis Strategic Partners office. Unlike the sleek glass tower in Boston, this location was intentionally understated, reflecting Uncle William's belief that investment wisdom flourished best away from the spotlight. Inside, little had changed since his day. The wooden filing cabinets still lined the walls, though they now contained historical records rather than active files. The old analog clock still ticked steadily above the doorway. Even the scent remained the same: leather-bound books, lemon furniture polish, and the faint aroma of the English breakfast tea Uncle William had favored. I settled into his old leather chair, now mine, and opened the bottom desk drawer where he had kept his most private journals. These weren't investment records, but his personal reflections on the psychology of markets. Observations about how human behavior influenced financial decisions in ways pure data could never capture. "Markets remember," he had written in one entry I particularly treasured, "even when analysts forget. The patterns of human fear and greed leave imprints that mathematical models can't fully comprehend. That's why fundamental analysis will never be obsolete, because it accounts for the humanity behind the numbers." How Nathan would have scoffed at such sentiments during our marriage. Quantifiable metrics are the only reliable indicators, he'd insisted countless times. Human judgment is just bias dressed up as experience. The irony was that his own human bias, his dismissal of traditional wisdom, his belief in his own exceptionalism, had been his greatest vulnerability. By assuming his wife could never understand modern finance, he had created the perfect blind spot for me to work within. My phone buzzed with a text from Samantha, who had remained at Quantum as CFO after the revelation. Audit committee finished reviewing the governance changes. Full compliance achieved 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The board is impressed. I smiled slightly. Quantum was healing, becoming stronger under proper governance while maintaining its innovative edge. The company Nathan had feared I would destroy was actually thriving under the balanced approach he had once mocked. Another text followed, this one from Olivia. Kowalski called. He's proposing a joint venture between his fund and Davis Strategic. Says it's time to show the market that old and new can collaborate effectively. Warren Kowalski's interest was significant. As one of the most respected traditional investors in the country, His willingness to partner with us on innovation-focused projects sent a powerful message to the market. It was exactly the kind of bridge building the financial sector needed, connecting established wisdom with thoughtful advancement rather than treating them as opposing forces. I spent 2 hours in the Providence office, reviewing special situations that required deeper reflection than the busy Boston headquarters allowed. As I worked, I could almost feel Uncle William's presence. His methodical approach, his insistence on understanding the fundamentals of any investment rather than being seduced by market enthusiasm or frightened by temporary setbacks. When I finally emerged, night had fallen completely. The car was waiting, Michael standing patiently beside it. "Boston, Ms. Davis?" "Actually, Michael, there's one more stop I'd like to make." 20 minutes later, we pulled up outside an unassuming restaurant in a residential neighborhood. Castellini's had been Uncle William's favorite place, a family-owned Italian establishment where he had celebrated every significant Davis Strategic Partners milestone. The owners still recognized me, greeting me with warm familiarity as I entered. "Ms. Davis, it's been months since we've seen you. Your usual table is open." The usual table, a quiet corner spot where Uncle William had first outlined his succession plan 5 years ago, explaining why he was entrusting his legacy to me rather than to more experienced managers. "They know the methods, little owl. But you understand the philosophy. Anyone can learn techniques, but wisdom has to be earned." I had just placed my order when a familiar figure appeared beside my table. Nathan stood awkwardly, looking both confident and hesitant, a combination I'd never observed during our marriage. "I thought I might find you here," he said. "Michael mentioned you were stopping at Castellini's when I called looking for you." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please." Nathan sat, studying me with new eyes, the eyes of someone who had been forced to reconsider everything he thought he knew. "I'm flying to London tomorrow," he said. "Oxford invited me to speak at their finance symposium." "On disruption and discipline?" I asked, referencing his book title. A rueful smile crossed his face. "On the dangers of dismissing traditional wisdom in the pursuit of innovation. Apparently, my cautionary tale has educational value." The waiter brought my usual glass of Barolo, and seeing Nathan, automatically brought a second glass. In our better days, we had occasionally dined here together, though Nathan had always seemed slightly impatient with the restaurant's old-world charm. "I signed the final documents for the Artemis investment," Nathan said after the waiter departed. Though he was no longer CEO of Quantum, he had retained his board seat and served on the investment committee. Their hybrid blockchain approach is exactly what you predicted would succeed 2 years ago. When you called it blockchain for dinosaurs, I recalled. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I've been wrong about many things." We fell into shop talk about market conditions and emerging opportunities, the kind of professional conversation that had been impossible during our marriage but now flowed naturally. Without his need to dominate and my need to hide my expertise, we could actually exchange ideas as equals. "I met with Jason Reynolds yesterday," I mentioned as our meals arrived. "Brilliant algorithm, but he hasn't considered how it would perform during structural market shifts." Nathan nodded. "Another version of me. Technically gifted, but missing the bigger picture." He paused, twirling pasta around his fork. "I'm mentoring him at MIT now, trying to help him avoid my mistakes." "That's surprisingly self-aware." "Humiliation is an effective teacher," he replied with a half smile. "When your wife reveals she's secretly controlled your company for years while you mocked her financial acumen, it tends to prompt some serious self-reflection." For the first time since the revelation, I found myself genuinely laughing with Nathan rather than at his expense. There was something oddly freeing about sitting across from him now, no longer performing the role of supportive wife, no longer hiding my true capabilities, no longer maintaining the careful fiction that had defined our relationship. "Rebecca," he said, his tone growing serious. "I've been wanting to ask you something. That night at our holiday party, when I was particularly dismissive about your investment club, did you already know you would reveal everything the next day?" I considered the question, remembering the moment when his mockery had crossed. Some invisible line when I had finally decided the charade had continued long enough. "The timing wasn't planned that far in advance," I admitted. "But your performance that night certainly confirmed it was necessary." He nodded slowly. "I've replayed that evening in my mind hundreds of times. The things I said. I'm amazed you didn't reveal everything right then and there." "That would have been emotionally satisfying but strategically unwise," I replied. "Uncle William always taught me that the right timing is as important as the right decision." "Your uncle?" Nathan shook his head slightly. "I wish I had actually listened when you talked about his investment philosophy instead of dismissing it as outdated sentimentality." "You might have discovered who was really controlling your company," I agreed with a small smile. We finished dinner with surprisingly comfortable conversation, discussing everything from Quantum's new leadership to the changing regulatory landscape for fintech firms. As we waited for the check, Nathan hesitated before reaching into his briefcase. "I brought something I thought you might want to see." He slid a magazine across the table, the latest issue of Financial Innovation Quarterly with Nathan's face on the cover. The headline read, "Humbled Visionary, Nathan Turner on What Traditional Finance Can Teach Disruptors." I raised an eyebrow. "Quite a change from your last cover story." "Read the pull quote," he suggested, pointing to the highlighted text. I read aloud. "My greatest failure wasn't losing control of my company. It was failing to recognize the value in traditions I was too arrogant to understand. Innovation without foundation isn't progress. It's just motion." Something unexpected tightened in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps appreciation. For the difficult journey Nathan had undertaken from arrogance to humility. "It's a good quote," I acknowledged. "It's the truth," he replied simply. "One I learned too late to save our marriage, but perhaps not too late to save others from making the same mistake." As we parted outside the restaurant, Nathan paused. "By the way, congratulations on the Wharton commencement invitation. They chose well." I studied him, trying to detect any hint of resentment or sarcasm, but found none. This, perhaps, was the most profound change the revelation had wrought. Not in the financial markets or in Davis Strategic Partners' public profile, but in Nathan himself. "Thank you," I said. "Good luck in London." As my car pulled away, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought me here. 3 years of playing a role while building something substantial in the shadows. The calculated risk of revelation. The aftermath that had transformed not just my professional standing but Nathan's entire worldview. Uncle William had always insisted that the true measure of an investment strategy wasn't how it performed during favorable conditions, but how it weathered unexpected storms. The same, I realized, could be said for people. Nathan was showing remarkable resilience in the face of public humiliation, reinventing himself not by rejecting his past, but by integrating its painful lessons. Back in my Boston penthouse, purchased after the divorce settlement, I kicked off my heels and poured a small glass of scotch, Uncle William's preferred evening ritual. The lights of Boston Harbor sparkled below, ships moving slowly through. The darkness, their navigation lights steady and purposeful. My phone buzzed with an email alert. The subject line made me smile. Harvard Business School Case Study. The Davis Doctrine. Balancing Tradition and Innovation in Modern Finance. Final draft for review. I had come full circle. From the student who once absorbed Uncle William's wisdom to the subject of business school case studies myself. From the wife dismissed as maintaining outdated investment traditions to the financial leader whose approach was now being taught to the next generation. Opening my laptop, I began reviewing the case study, making minor corrections where needed. The author had captured the essence of what I now called the Davis Doctrine. Not a rejection of innovation, but an insistence that it be built upon sound fundamental principles. Not blind adherence to tradition, but thoughtful evolution that preserved timeless wisdom. As I worked, a notification appeared. An article from the Wall Street Journal analyzing the aftermath of what they were still calling the quantum revelation. The piece examined how the financial industry had changed in the months since, noting a significant shift in how female financial professionals were perceived and treated. Sources report that attendance by male executives at women's investment groups has increased dramatically, the article noted with a touch of irony, and investment proposals from female analysts are receiving unprecedented attention from senior leadership. As one executive anonymously confessed, no one wants to be the next Nathan Turner. I couldn't help but smile at that. Perhaps the most meaningful consequence of the revelation wasn't my own increased influence, but the doors it had opened for other women whose financial acumen had been similarly dismissed. A text arrived from Zoe. Final preparations complete for tomorrow's quantum board meeting. The strategic partnership with Blackwell Bank will be presented for approval. Analysis projects 18-22% return on investment over the first 3 years. I sent a brief acknowledgement, then set the phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate that the Davis Doctrine could deliver sustainable growth in an industry too often seduced by momentum and disruption. For their own sake. For now, though, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction, not in Nathan's humiliation or my own vindication, but in the knowledge that Uncle William's legacy had not only survived, but flourished. His investment philosophy, once dismissed as outdated, was now recognized as visionary precisely because it balanced innovation with fundamental wisdom. The following morning, I arrived at Quantum's headquarters for the board meeting, noticing subtle changes in how I was received. Security guards who had once barely acknowledged me, seeing only the CEO's wife, now stood a little straighter as I passed. Executive assistants who had previously directed me to the spouse's waiting area now escorted me directly to the boardroom. More telling were the expressions of the board members as I entered, a mixture of respect, caution, and curiosity. These were people who had known me for years but were still adjusting to the reality that the quiet woman in carefully appropriate attire had been the power behind the throne all along. "Good morning," I greeted them, taking my seat. "Shall we begin?" The meeting proceeded efficiently under the leadership of the new independent chairman, a respected industry veteran who understood both traditional finance and technological innovation. I participated actively but judiciously, offering insights, where valuable but never dominating the conversation. This too was part of the Davis Doctrine, the understanding that true influence doesn't require constant assertion. Uncle William had taught me that the most effective leaders often spoke least, their selective interventions carrying more weight precisely because they were measured and thoughtful. When the proposed partnership with Blackwell Bank came up for discussion, I noticed several board members glancing my way, clearly wondering if this had been my initiative. In fact, Elizabeth Blackwell had approached Davis Strategic Partners independently, impressed by our governance model and hybrid investment approach. "The Blackwell partnership represents a significant opportunity," the chairman noted after the presentation concluded. "Their European presence complements our North American strength, and their traditional banking expertise balances our technological focus." Heads nodded around the table. The deal made strategic sense on multiple levels. Exactly the kind of thoughtful expansion that created sustainable value rather than flashy headlines. "I move we approve the partnership framework," said Derek, who had retained his board seat through the transition, "with authorization for the executive team to finalize details within the parameters presented." The motion passed unanimously. Another step in Quantum's evolution from Nathan's personal vehicle to a properly governed financial institution. As the meeting adjourned, Samantha approached with a tablet displaying real-time market data. "We're up 3% since the partnership leaked," she noted. "The market clearly approves of our new direction." "The market rewards consistency and clarity," I replied, "both of which we now provide." As I prepared to leave, Derek fell into step beside me. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months," he commented. "Quantum feels like a completely different company now." "It is, and it isn't," I replied. The innovative technology Nathan built remains at the core. We've simply provided the governance framework and strategic discipline to make it sustainable. In the lobby, I crossed paths with a tour group, new employees being shown around the headquarters. The young woman leading the tour hesitated when she saw me, clearly uncertain about the protocol for encountering the controlling shareholder in an informal setting. "Ms. Davis," she managed. "What an honor. Everyone, this is Rebecca Davis, founder of Davis Strategic Partners and our majority shareholder." I smiled warmly at the new employees, diverse, energetic faces representing the future of the organization. "Welcome to Quantum. The work you'll do here bridges traditional financial wisdom with technological innovation. Both are essential to our mission." As I continued toward the exit, I overheard one young man whisper to another, "That's her, the one who revealed she controlled the whole company while her husband thought she was just running an investment club." His companion responded too quietly for me to hear, but I caught the respectful glance she cast in my direction. For these new employees, the quantum revelation wasn't just business history. It was a cautionary tale about the danger of underestimating others based on preconceptions or bias. Outside, Boston's financial district hummed with midday activity. I checked my watch, 30 minutes until my interview with the economist. Just enough time to review my talking points while enjoying a quiet lunch at the small cafe across from Davis Strategic Partners headquarters. "Your usual table is ready, Ms. Davis," the hostess greeted me. Before the revelation, I had been just another business professional enjoying the cafe's discreet atmosphere. Now I was recognized instantly, my preferences remembered, my arrival anticipated. As I settled at my table with a view of the harbor, I noticed a woman at a nearby table glancing my way repeatedly. Finally, she gathered her courage and approached. "Ms. Davis, I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch," she began hesitantly. "My name is Jennifer Liang. I'm a portfolio manager at Meridian Investments." I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Please join me for a moment." Relief washed over her face as she sat. "Thank you. I've been wanting to tell you. Your story changed things for me." The day after the quantum revelation, my boss actually listened to my investment proposal for the first time instead of talking over me. I smiled slightly. I'm glad something positive came from it. "It wasn't just my boss," she continued earnestly. "The whole atmosphere changed. Suddenly, everyone was second-guessing their assumptions about women in finance. Male colleagues started attending our investment club meetings. Senior management implemented new protocols to ensure diverse perspectives were heard. Progress born of fear is still progress, I suppose," I observed. She nodded. "I've been building my own investment methodology based on similar principles to what I've read about your approach, balancing fundamental analysis with selective technological applications. I call it intentional innovation." "A good name," I acknowledged. "Innovation should always be purposeful, not pursued for its own sake." We chatted briefly about market conditions and investment philosophy before she reluctantly returned to her table. As she left, I noticed several other diners watching our interaction curiously. How strange to think that a conversation that would have been ignored 6 months ago now drew attention simply because of who I had revealed myself to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Meeting with Kowalski confirmed for next week. His team is eager to explore the joint venture structure." Another message followed from my communications director. The Economist reporter just arrived at the office, requesting to record the interview for potential podcast use as well as the print feature. I finished my lunch, left a generous tip, and walked the short distance back to Davis Strategic Partners headquarters. The receptionist directed me to the conference room where the Economist journalist was waiting. A thoughtful-looking woman in her 40s with a digital recorder and well-worn notebook. "Ms. Davis, thank you for making time," she greeted me. "Eliza Montgomery. We're doing a special issue on governance in financial technology, and your perspective bridges both worlds in a unique way." The interview began with standard questions about Davis Strategic Partners' investment philosophy and my views on the proper relationship between traditional financial principles and technological innovation. But Eliza soon moved to more personal territory. "Many readers are curious about the psychological aspects of your experience," she said. "For 3 years, you maintained a public persona as Nathan Turner's supportive wife, while secretly building and controlling an investment empire. What was that disconnect like?" I considered my response carefully. "It wasn't as dramatic as it sounds. I wasn't playing a character entirely different from myself. I simply allowed people, including my husband, to see what they expected to see." "And what was that exactly?" "A woman interested in finance but not truly understanding it. Someone maintaining family traditions without grasping their modern applications. The narrative wrote itself because it aligned with pre-existing biases." Eliza nodded, making notes. "Was there a specific moment when you decided to reveal yourself as the controlling shareholder of Quantum?" The holiday party flashed in my mind. Nathan's particularly dismissive comments about my investment club, the knowing glances exchanged among guests who were in on the secret, the realization that the charade had outlived its usefulness. "There came a point when maintaining the fiction was doing more harm than good," I replied. "Not just to me personally, but to Quantum itself. The company needed proper governance and strategic discipline to reach its full potential. Many would have revealed the truth in a more confrontational manner," Eliza observed. "Your approach was remarkably measured. A formal board meeting, a press release, a calm public statement. Was that restraint difficult?" I smiled slightly. "Uncle William always taught me that in finance, emotion is the enemy of sound decision-making." The revelation wasn't about public humiliation or personal vindication. It was about establishing proper governance for a company with significant market influence. The interview continued for almost an hour, covering everything from specific governance changes at Quantum to broader trends in financial technology regulation. As we concluded, Eliza asked one final question. "What do you hope will be the lasting legacy of what people now call the quantum revelation?" I thought about the young portfolio manager I'd just met, about Jason Reynolds and his algorithm, about Nathan's transformation from dismissive husband to humbled teacher. "I hope it reminds us that wisdom doesn't always announce itself," I said. "Finally, that valuable insights can come from unexpected sources, and that the strongest financial strategies don't reject either tradition or innovation. They find the balance between them." After the interview, I returned to my office to find Olivia waiting with quarterly performance reports for our newest investment vehicles. As we reviewed the numbers together, I noted with satisfaction that our balanced approach continued to deliver strong, sustainable returns without the extreme volatility that plagued pure disruption plays. The hybrid fund is outperforming benchmarks by 12%, Olivia noted. Institutional investors are taking notice. We've received 3 new inquiries this week alone. "And the Davis Governance Initiative?" I asked, referring to our newest venture, a consulting practice helping technology companies implement balanced governance models. 6 clients confirmed, including 2 Fortune 500 firms. The Quantum case study has become a powerful marketing tool. She hesitated before adding, "Nathan's book is helping too. Advanced copies are circulating, and his candid assessment of his own governance failures lends credibility to our approach." I nodded, unsurprised that Nathan had found a way to transform even his humiliation into an opportunity. That resilience had been what attracted me to him initially, before his success hardened into arrogance and his confidence into dismissiveness. As afternoon faded into evening, I found myself once again at my office window, watching Boston's financial district transition from workday intensity to evening elegance. Soon the restaurants would fill with the same executives who had once dismissed traditional financial wisdom, but now claimed they had always valued balanced approaches and proper governance. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert. Tomorrow morning I would deliver the opening address at the Northeastern Finance Symposium, an honor that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago when I was still perceived as merely Nathan's wife, with a quaint investment hobby. The topic I had chosen was deliberately provocative. The illusion of disruption. Why financial innovation succeeds only when grounded in timeless principles. It was a direct challenge to the tech-obsessed narrative that had dominated finance for the past decade, the same narrative Nathan had once championed so enthusiastically. As I gathered my things to leave, my eye caught the framed motto on my office wall, Uncle William's favorite saying, rendered in his own handwriting, "Markets reward patience above all other virtues." How true that had proven to be. Patience had allowed me to build Davis Strategic Partners methodically while others chased quick returns. Patience had enabled me to wait for the perfect moment to reveal my control of quantum. And patience was now rewarding us with sustainable growth, while less disciplined competitors struggled with market volatility. In the elevator descending to the lobby, I scrolled through my emails, noting one from Harvard Business School confirming my guest lecture next month. The subject would be governance in financial technology firms, a topic I had quite literally written the new playbook on. Outside, the evening air carried the first hint of spring after Boston's long winter. As my driver held the car door, I paused to look back at the illuminated sign above our headquarters. Davis Strategic Partners. No longer hidden in the shadows, no longer dismissed as maintaining outdated traditions, but recognized as a pioneer in balancing timeless wisdom with thoughtful innovation. "Home, Ms. Davis?" Michael asked as I settled into the car. "Yes," I replied, thinking not of physical location, but of the sense of alignment I now felt, no longer divided between public persona and private power, no longer maintaining the fiction that had been necessary but constraining. For the first time in years, I was fully myself in all contexts, professional and personal, public and private. The woman who appeared in financial press profiles was the same one who made investment decisions, who mentored emerging professionals, who occasionally still met her ex-husband for dinner to discuss the industry they both loved from their now very different perspectives. As the car navigated Boston's evening traffic, I found myself thinking about tomorrow's symposium speech and the message I most wanted to convey. Beyond the specific investment principles and governance models, there was a deeper truth I had, learned through the entire quantum experience. True power doesn't come from controlling others or from disrupting for disruption's sake. It comes from patience, from understanding fundamental principles, and from the willingness to be underestimated while building something of lasting value. Uncle William had understood this intuitively. Nathan had learned it painfully. And I had demonstrated it conclusively through what would likely remain the defining chapter of my professional life. The moment when a supposedly outdated investment philosophy proved its enduring relevance in the most dramatic way possible. As Boston's skyline receded in the rearview mirror, I felt a sense of closure mixed with new beginning. The revelation that had shaken the financial world 6 months ago was now history, documented in case studies, analyzed in business schools, referenced in financial media. What mattered now was what came next. The balanced investment approach Davis Strategic Partners would continue to pioneer, the governance models we would help implement across the industry, and the next generation of financial professionals we would mentor to value both innovation and tradition. The quantum revelation had been necessary and transformative. But the true legacy would be the Davis Doctrine, the philosophy that traditional wisdom and technological innovation weren't opposing forces, but complementary strengths that, when properly balanced, created something more powerful than either could achieve alone. 1 year had passed since what the financial world now simply called the revelation. The spring sunshine streamed through the windows of my corner office at Davis Strategic Partners, illuminating the awards that now lined the shelves, recognition that would have been unthinkable during those years of calculated invisibility. The most recent addition stood in the center, the Financial Leadership Award from the Women's Finance Coalition, inscribed with words that still made me smile. To Rebecca Davis, who redefined power in finance by choosing when to be seen. My intercom buzzed softly. "Ms. Davis, your 10 o'clock is here," Zoe announced. "Send her in, please." The woman who entered wasn't what most people would expect from a rising fintech CEO. Amara Wilson wore a simply cut dress, minimal jewelry, and carried a leather portfolio rather than the latest tablet. At 36, she had built Meridian, payment systems from a small startup into a formidable competitor in the digital payment space, all while maintaining a deliberately low profile. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Davis," she said, taking the offered seat. "I've been hoping to meet you since the revelation." I studied her thoughtfully. "You've created something impressive at Meridian. Your governance structure particularly caught my attention. Unusual for a company at your stage." A slight smile. That was deliberate. I watched what happened at Quantum and dozens of other firms where growth outpaced governance. I wanted to build differently from the beginning. "Smart," I acknowledged. "Now, what can Davis Strategic Partners do for you today?" Amara straightened in her chair. "I'm seeking strategic investment, but with very specific terms. We're preparing for significant expansion, but I want partners who value sustainable growth over quick exits." Your approach to the Quantum situation demonstrated exactly the philosophy I'm looking for. For the next hour, we discussed Meridian's business model, growth strategy, and Amara's vision for bringing traditional financial discipline to digital payment innovation. What struck me most was her clarity about maintaining control. She had deliberately structured her company to prevent the kind of governance vulnerabilities Nathan had created at Quantum. "You've clearly studied the revelation closely," I observed as she concluded her presentation. "I've studied you closely," she corrected. "The revelation was just the moment everyone else discovered what you'd been building all along. I'm more interested in the years before, how you maintained strategic direction while being consistently underestimated." I found myself genuinely impressed, not just with Meridian's fundamentals, which were solid, but with Amara herself. She represented something new in fintech leadership, a founder who understood from the beginning that sustainable success required more than disruptive technology. It required governance, discipline, and patience. Davis Strategic Partners would be interested in exploring an investment relationship, I told her as our meeting concluded. "I'll have my team prepare a term sheet reflecting your governance priorities." After she left, I remained at my desk, thoughtful. Amara represented the most tangible evidence of what many were calling the Rebecca effect, a new generation of financial leaders, particularly women, who had taken deliberate lessons from my experience. They built their companies with proper governance from the start, maintained controlling interests through careful capital structures, and weren't afraid to embrace traditional financial principles alongside technological innovation. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Quantum quarterly results just announced. 4th consecutive quarter exceeding projections. Stock up 6% in early trading. I smiled slightly. Quantum continued to thrive under its new leadership and governance structure. The company Nathan had feared I would destroy was actually stronger than ever, its innovative technology now balanced by strategic discipline and proper oversight. The morning passed quickly with investment committee reviews and strategy sessions. After lunch, I walked 3 blocks to Boston's historic Financial Hall, where I would deliver the keynote address at the annual Eastern Finance Forum. an honor traditionally reserved for the most influential voices in the financial world. The room fell silent as I took the podium, facing hundreds of financial professionals who, just 18 months earlier, would have seen me only as Nathan Turner's supportive wife. Now they leaned forward attentively, digital recorders and notebooks, ready to capture every word. "The greatest illusion in modern finance," I began, "is the belief that we must choose between tradition and innovation. That we must either cling to the past or disrupt it entirely. The truth is far more nuanced. The most sustainable financial models don't reject either heritage or progress. They integrate both into something stronger than either could be alone." As I continued my address, I noticed familiar faces in the audience. Derek and Samantha sat near the front, still with Quantum, but now part of a leadership team that respected proper governance. Olivia and Marcus were a few rows back, key architects of Davis Strategic Partners' expansion. And in the very back, half hidden but unmistakable, was Nathan. Our paths crossed occasionally in professional settings, though he had relocated to New York 6 months earlier to lead a new financial education initiative at Columbia Business School. His book, Disruption and Discipline: Finding Balance in Modern Finance, had become required reading in business schools nationwide. The humbled visionary had found a new calling, teaching the next generation of financial innovators the lessons he had learned so painfully. After my speech concluded to substantial applause, I navigated through well-wishers and congratulations, eventually finding a quiet moment near the refreshment table. Nathan approached cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance. "Excellent speech," he said, "particularly the points about integrative innovation." "Thank you," I replied. "I understand your program at Columbia is gaining significant attention." He nodded. "Students are particularly interested in the quantum case study. They all want to understand how I could have missed what was happening right under my nose." "And what do you tell them?" A rueful smile. "That arrogance creates blindness. That dismissing traditional wisdom because it doesn't fit your narrative is the surest path to vulnerability. And that sometimes the person you underestimate most becomes your greatest teacher." There was no bitterness in his voice, just the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had been forced to reconsider everything he thought he knew. "Your Financial Times piece was insightful," I offered. Nathan had recently published a lengthy analysis of governance failures in high-growth tech companies. The section on founder overconfidence was particularly strong. "Written from painfully acquired expertise," he acknowledged with a self-deprecating smile. We chatted briefly about industry developments before a group of eager finance students surrounded him, clearly recognizing the author whose cautionary tale had become part of their curriculum. As Nathan graciously turned his attention to them, I slipped away, checking my phone to find messages from Zoe about afternoon appointments. Outside, Boston's financial district pulsed with midday energy. As I waited for my car, I spotted Jennifer Leong, the portfolio manager I'd met at the cafe a year earlier, hurrying into the building surrounded by colleagues who were clearly seeking her input. The shifting power dynamics throughout the financial sector remained one of the most significant after-effects of the revelation. Back at Davis Strategic Partners headquarters, I found Warren Kowalski waiting in the conference room, his team all ready, setting up presentation materials for our joint venture review. "Rebecca," the legendary investor greeted me warmly. "Caught the live stream of your speech. Couldn't have said it better myself, though I've been trying to make those same points for 40 years. I smiled. Some lessons take a dramatic demonstration to truly sink in. "Speaking of dramatic," Warren said as we settled around the conference table, "have you seen the Harvard Business Review's 10th anniversary issue? They're featuring what they consider the 10 most significant business transformations of the decade. The quantum revelation is number 3. The meeting proceeded efficiently, reviewing the progress of our joint investment vehicles that combined Kowalski's traditional value approach with Davis Strategic Partners' selective technological applications. The results spoke for themselves. Consistent outperformance with significantly lower volatility than pure tech-focused funds. As afternoon turned to evening, I found myself once again at my office window, watching Boston's financial district transform as daylight faded. The phone on my desk rang, the private line reserved for family and close associates. "Rebecca Davis," I answered. "Ms. Davis, it's Elizabeth Blackwell." The voice belonged to the managing director of the European private bank that had partnered with Davis Strategic Partners the previous year. "I hope I'm not disturbing your evening." "Not at all, Elizabeth. How are things in London?" "Quite productive. I'm calling because our board has authorized me to explore expanding our partnership. The hybrid fund has performed exceptionally well, and we're interested in applying the model across additional asset classes." We spoke for 20 minutes about potential structures, agreeing to meet in person when Elizabeth visited Boston the following month. As I ended the call, I couldn't help reflecting on how dramatically circumstances had changed. Before the revelation, a partnership with Blackwell Bank would have been unimaginable, not because our performance didn't warrant it, but because they would never have looked beyond the surface to see what Davis Strategic Partners truly represented. My calendar alert chimed softly, a reminder of tomorrow morning's guest lecture at Wharton's Executive Education Program. The topic was Hidden Influence, Governance Lessons from the Quantum Revelation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very story that had once been my most closely guarded secret was now teaching material for the next generation of financial leaders. As I gathered my things to leave, I paused at the small side table where I kept personal mementos. Among them was a framed note in Uncle William's distinctive handwriting. "To my little owl, remember that true influence doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it works most effectively in whispers." How right he had been? For years, I had built Davis Strategic Partners in the shadows, while Nathan stood in the spotlight declaring the death of traditional financial principles. The very invisibility he had helped create, his dismissal of my capabilities, his assumptions about my limitations, had become my greatest strategic advantage. The car was waiting when I reached the lobby. "The Providence office, Ms. Davis?" my driver asked. "Not tonight, Michael. I'm having dinner at Castellini's first." 20 minutes later, I was settled at my usual corner table in Uncle William's favorite restaurant. Though I now controlled one of Boston's most influential investment firms, I still found comfort in this modest family-owned establishment, where the owners knew me not as a financial power broker, but as William Davis's niece, who appreciated their homemade gnocchi. I had just placed my order when I noticed a young woman hesitating near my table, clearly gathering courage to approach. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, dressed in the careful business attire of someone early in their professional journey. "Ms. Davis?" she began tentatively. "I'm so sorry to interrupt your dinner. My name is Olivia Chen. I'm in the financial management program at Eastern Bank." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please, join me for a moment." Relief washed over her face as she sat. "Thank you. I've been following your work since the revelation. Actually, I wrote my master's thesis on governance structures in fintech firms, using quantum as my primary case study." "An increasingly popular topic," I noted with a slight smile. "What fascinated me most wasn't just the revelation itself," she continued earnestly, "but how you built something substantial while being consistently underestimated. I'm at the beginning of my career, and I often feel—" She hesitated. "Underestimated?" I suggested. She nodded. "Exactly. People see my age, my gender, my relatively junior position, and they make assumptions about what I know or what I'm capable of understanding." I studied her thoughtfully, remembering my own early days, the dismissive glances, the interrupted explanations, the assumptions that I couldn't possibly comprehend complex financial concepts. Being underestimated can be frustrating, I acknowledged. But it can also be strategically valuable. When others don't see your full capabilities, They reveal more of themselves, their thinking, their vulnerabilities, their blind spots. Sophie leaned forward slightly. That's what I've been trying to tell myself. But sometimes it's hard to take the long view when you're being talked over in meetings or having your ideas attributed to others. Those experiences are real and they're challenging, I agreed. But remember that your ultimate goal isn't recognition for its own sake. It's building something meaningful, whether that's a career, a company, or a new financial model. Focus on that substance, and the recognition will eventually follow. We chatted for a few more minutes before she reluctantly excused herself, expressing heartfelt thanks for the conversation. As she left, I found myself reflecting on how the revelation had transformed not just my own circumstances, but the broader landscape for women like Sophie, creating both new possibilities and new expectations. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line from my communications director read, Time Magazine Annual Influence List, embargoed. Opening the message, I found myself listed among the year's 100 most influential figures in global finance, with a profile emphasizing how the revelation had forced a reassessment of hidden power structures throughout the industry. The accompanying photo showed me at Davis Strategic Partners headquarters, Boston's financial district visible through the window behind me, a stark contrast to the images that would have been used just 2 years earlier, which invariably featured me standing slightly behind Nathan at industry events, the supportive wife with the quaint investment hobby. As I enjoyed my dinner, I couldn't help overhearing snippets of conversation from nearby tables. Financial professionals discussing market trends, investment strategies, and inevitably, the continued reverberations of the revelation. Even a year later, it remained a reference point, a before and after moment that had forced the industry to reconsider its assumptions about where power and wisdom might reside. Back home in my Harborview apartment that evening, I reviewed the final draft of my upcoming book, The Davis Doctrine: Balancing Tradition and Innovation in Modern Finance. Unlike Nathan's confessional narrative, my book focused on investment principles rather than personal stories. Though the publishers had insisted on including at least one chapter about the revelation itself, recognizing its value as both cautionary tale and strategic case study. Opening my laptop, I made final edits to the conclusion. The most enduring lesson of my journey isn't about hidden control or dramatic revelations. It's about the timeless value of patience, of fundamental analysis, and of understanding that true financial wisdom doesn't reject either heritage or innovation. It integrates them into something stronger than either could be alone. In a financial landscape obsessed with disruption and revolutionary change, sometimes the most powerful approach is to quietly build something of lasting value while others chase momentary advantages. And sometimes, the greatest strategic asset is allowing others to see exactly what they expect to see, while you develop something they never anticipated. Satisfied with the final wording, I sent the manuscript to my editor and closed the laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate that the Davis Doctrine could continue delivering sustainable results in an industry too often seduced by short-term thinking and flashy innovation. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction, not in Nathan's humiliation or even in my own vindication, but in the knowledge that Uncle William's legacy had not only survived, but flourished. His investment philosophy, once dismissed as outdated, was now recognized as visionary precisely because it balanced innovation with fundamental wisdom. The next morning dawned clear and bright, Boston Harbor sparkling under the spring sunshine. I arrived early at Davis Strategic Partners, reviewing the day's agenda before the office filled with activity. The quarterly investment committee meeting would occupy most of the morning, followed by lunch with Senator Marshall, who continued to seek my input on financial technology regulation. The afternoon would bring final preparations for tomorrow's annual Davis Strategic Partners Client Forum, a gathering that had grown from a small investment update to one of the most anticipated events on Boston's financial calendar. Leaders from banking, technology, and investment management would assemble to hear our perspective on balancing traditional principles with technological advancement. As the investment committee members began arriving, I greeted them individually, noting how the composition had evolved over the past year. What had once been a group consisting primarily of Uncle William's contemporaries now included emerging leaders from diverse backgrounds, a deliberate strategy to ensure we maintained both traditional wisdom and fresh perspectives. The hybrid technology fund is outperforming benchmarks by 16%, Marcus reported as the meeting began. Institutional allocation requests have increased 80% year over year. And more importantly, Olivia added, volatility metrics remain well below industry averages. We're delivering superior returns without the extreme fluctuations that plague pure technology plays. As the committee worked through its agenda, I observed the dynamics with satisfaction. This was the Davis Doctrine in action, not rejecting technological innovation, but insisting it be grounded in sound fundamental principles, not dismissing traditional analysis, but ensuring it evolved to address emerging opportunities. The meeting concluded with approval of 2 new investment vehicles designed to apply our hybrid approach to additional market segments. As the committee members departed, Derek lingered behind. Quantum's board approved the governance enhancement package, he reported. The transition is complete. Proper oversight mechanisms are now fully implemented across all divisions. I nodded, appreciating the significance of this milestone. The company Nathan had feared I would destroy through outdated governance principles was now thriving precisely because of those principles. Its innovative technology strengthened rather than constrained by proper oversight and strategic discipline. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and preparations for tomorrow's client forum. As evening approached, I found myself once again at my office window, watching Boston's financial district transition from daytime intensity to nighttime elegance. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Just saw the advance copy of your book. The chapter on integrating traditional analysis with technological innovation is particularly strong. Congratulations. I smiled slightly at this unexpected gesture. Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us could have anticipated. Not friendship exactly, but a form of mutual respect born from the dramatic recalibration of our professional dynamics. Another message followed, this one from Uncle William's old friend who had helped me maintain the Davis legacy during those years of calculated invisibility. William would be prouder than he could express. You didn't just preserve his principles, you proved their enduring value in ways he never imagined. As I prepared to leave for the day, Zoe appeared with a final update. The seating chart for tomorrow's client forum is complete. We've had to expand capacity twice due to unprecedented demand. I thanked her and gathered my things, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the young woman absorbing Uncle William's wisdom, to the financial leader whose approach was now sought after by institutions worldwide. From the wife dismissed as maintaining outdated investment traditions, to the subject of business school case studies and financial leadership profiles. The transformation hadn't happened overnight with the revelation. It had been building quietly for years as I developed Davis strategic partners in the shadows, while Nathan unknowingly provided the perfect cover through his dismissal of traditional financial principles. Outside, Boston's evening air carried the promise of summer. As my driver held the car door, I paused to look back at the illuminated sign above our headquarters. Davis Strategic Partners, no longer hidden in the shadows, no longer dismissed as maintaining outdated traditions, but recognized as a pioneer in balancing timeless wisdom with thoughtful innovation. Home, Ms. Davis? Michael asked as I settled into the car. Yes, I replied, thinking of the journey completed and the path ahead. The Rebecca Davis who would address tomorrow's client forum was neither the carefully invisible strategist of those early years, nor the suddenly revealed power behind Quantum's throne. She was something that had evolved through both experiences. A financial leader who understood that true influence doesn't always announce itself loudly, but works most effectively through patience, strategic thinking, and the willingness to be underestimated while building something of lasting value. As Boston's skyline receded in the rearview mirror, I felt a sense of completion mixed with new beginning. The revelation that had shaken the financial world was now history, documented in case studies, analyzed in business schools, referenced in financial media. What mattered now was what came next. The balanced investment approach Davis Strategic Partners would continue to pioneer, the governance models we would help implement across the industry, and the next generation of financial professionals we would mentor to value both innovation and tradition. In the end, that would be the true legacy of the journey. Not the dramatic moment of revelation, but the enduring value of the Davis Doctrine that balanced the wisdom of the past with the possibilities of the future. In a financial world, too, often seduced by disruption for its own sake, that balance represented something revolutionary in its own right. The understanding that sometimes the most powerful innovation isn't rejecting tradition, but building thoughtfully upon it. My phone lit up with a final message for the day, this time from Amara Wilson. Term sheet received and approved. Looking forward to building something meaningful together. I smiled, appreciating the symmetry. Just as Uncle William had once mentored me, I would now help guide Amara's vision for bringing traditional financial discipline to digital payment innovation. The cycle continued. Wisdom passed from one generation to the next, each adding new dimensions while preserving fundamental principles. The Davis legacy had not only survived, it had flourished in ways Uncle William could never have imagined, proving that sometimes the quietest approach creates the most lasting impact, and sometimes the person others underestimate becomes the one who ultimately reshapes their understanding of value, power, and enduring financial wisdom. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.